The way that I make news happen is simple. I tell you guys, well, looks like nothing's really happened today, so I'm gonna do this video, and then as soon as it posts, news. So maybe today, July 13th, middle of the summer, it's nice out, about 20 degrees here. That's Celsius, not Fahrenheit. Not that cold in Canada. And I'm wearing the Joel Quenneville jersey today. You know, the funniest thing is, the funniest thing I've seen in this offseason has been they showed Joel Quenneville in profile and how much this logo looks like Joel Quenneville in profile. So it was a match meant to happen. I guess they went to him and went, look at our logo. Here's your face. Here's a mirror. You see it? You see it? All right. Now, all kidding aside, let's get to some news. And this is kind of from yesterday. So I've been waiting, and we're just not getting a whole lot of extra stuff here. Middle of July, GM's taking the week off. Psh. And I know this is the time of year where GMs do take some time off. Teams, they're off for a few weeks and whatnot. So we may see a slow few weeks other than signings, restricted free agent signings. Teams, including Columbus, have approached Marner. Here's the thing. Here's the problem that teams have. So teams are approaching Mitch Marner. All right, what are you looking for? And he tells them what they're looking for. And they're like, all right, we got to. So depending on how you read this, either teams are making offers and Marner's like, I'm not signing, I'm not interested in leaving Toronto, or is asking prices so high teams are being scared off at the idea of losing 4 first-round draft picks. You know what? And the fact that Columbus has looked at poaching Marner makes total sense. They have cap space, and they definitely could use another top 6 forward. Marner's fantastic. And I think he'd be a huge addition to any team if they were able to poach him from Toronto. I just don't think it's going to happen. So Marner's sitting right now, but it feels like this action that's going on could put some extra pressure on the Leafs to get it done. And when you look at what happened with Nylander last year, Kyle Dubas has to get this done. So he's got to sit down with him and figure it out. Laughton gets a 2-year, $4.6 million extension with the Flyers. That is reasonable. Now they've just got to sit down with their other restricteds, which includes Provorov, and get those deals done. I would expect them to happen soon. The St. Louis Blues in a very minor deal. I actually thought about making a video yesterday where I'd say the Blues and Maple Leafs make a mega deal, and then everybody would click on it and go, you clickbaity son of a... Dakota Joshua, who just for name alone I would think Toronto would trade him. I'm just kidding. Dakota Joshua gets traded to the St. Louis Blues, and they immediately sign him to a 2-year entry-level contract. So, kid that was property of the Leafs wasn't going to sign in Toronto, gets traded to St. Louis for future considerations. And we don't see that very often anymore. When I look through trade histories, future considerations are there a lot. Future considerations used to be a bigger deal than they are now. It used to be at the trade deadline, I will give you this player in exchange for future considerations, and after the playoffs were over, I might get back a substantial player from your roster in exchange. You don't see that anymore. And so St. Louis futures go to Toronto. It'll probably be a 6th-round pick, if anything. And it's probably along the lines of, okay, if he accomplishes this with you guys owe us a later draft pick. And Robbie Fabry's been extended for 1 year in St. Louis. I'm not convinced that Fabry's staying in St. Louis. He signs an extension. He hasn't played the games or had the points to justify getting a big raise, so he doesn't get that. But I get the feeling that if St. Louis is going to move somebody, Fabry may be a guy who's on his way out the door. He's still young. He has to show he can stay healthy. That's the biggest thing with Fabry. But I do get the feeling that his time in St. Louis is probably closer to an end now than we might have expected when he was drafted. We would have expected him to be, a Blue for quite a while. Contract limit is 50, so if you're going to look at where we might see a lot of guys get signed over the next little while, Dallas and the Oilers both have 48 contracts signed out of 50. So those are teams that might trade guys off for nothing, and you might go, well, wait, what are they thinking? And sometimes it might be that teams are making these trades saying, okay, we've got to move these contracts. So the teams that haven't got enough guys signed, that's where you may see them end up. Carolina's only got 33 players under contract right now. Usually by season start, it'll be in the low 40s. One thing I always hated with playing the NHL games, the EA Sports ones, is the teams will rush to 50 contracts. So a lot of the time I'm like, all right, I'm going to move this guy. What do you mean they've already got 50 guys under contract? The season hasn't even started yet. The hell, who did they sign? Well, so I got to take that back to make this trade? Anyways, because it's not realistic. Teams don't very often go to 50, especially during the summer. Florida, New Jersey, and Winnipeg all are at 35. And of course, in Winnipeg's case, that includes some high-profile restricted free agents. So it's kind of a false number with Winnipeg, sort of, but it's still that's the amount of guys they have signed to contracts. So if Dallas or Edmonton want to make a move, these are the teams that might be willing to accommodate. And the interesting thing with New Jersey and Carolina is they may very well have the cap space to accommodate somebody from, say, Edmonton. If Edmonton's trying to dump players off, and I get the feeling that there's a contract or two they would love to move if they could. So that's something to keep an eye on. Just, sort of maybe they'll make a trade while they're on a beach in Barbados or something. I don't know. They're off on holidays. I'm still here. Anyways, I also wanted to look at contracts that were signed this year. UFAs only, not restricted free agents. UFAs at $5 million plus. And I don't have them in any particular order, but it's interesting to see how much these guys are getting paid. Skinner at $9 million for 8 years. I still think the term is high, and I think they're paying him $9 million based on a career year, and we don't know whether or not he's going to be able to follow that up. He had a very up and down season. He's kind of that kind of guy. Could he fall back to 30? Absolutely. At 30 goals, is he a $9 million player? Probably not. Jordan Eberle at $5.5 million for 5 years. You know what? When you look at how the market shook out, that's fair. Eberle's going to want to have a bit of a bounce back from a down year last year, but overall the number's not bad. Erik Karlsson at $11.5 million for 8 years. It's a lot. The term is a ton for a guy who's struggled to stay healthy the last couple of years. San Jose's got their fingers crossed that he'll be able to do that and that he'll be worthy of that $11.5 million. Hey, if he gets back to being the player he was in Ottawa, he's worth every cent of it. Kevin Hayes, this is the contract everybody's talking about, right? $7.142 million over 7 years. The term is crazy, and the cap hit's crazy too. And you shouldn't have both that look crazy, but here we are, because William Karlsson's right under him at $5.9 million for 8 years. So Kevin Hayes is getting paid more than William Karlsson and has almost as much term. How does this happen? Like, I understand that Karlsson probably took a little bit less than he would have got on the market, but how does that happen? So, and I'm aware Karlsson was a restricted free agent, so he wasn't technically going to go UFA, but it's a huge contract for a long term, so I threw it on the board. And I know I could have put Meyer up, but Meyer at $6 million for 4 years. There's nothing really to debate there. That's a pretty solid contract. Good job by Doug Wilson. We'll see whether or not the Erik Karlsson contract comes back to bite him. Alex Edler for $6 million for 2 years, and I know there's people saying it's too much money for Edler and he's not going to be worthy of that contract. It's fine. In 2 years, when he comes off the books, the Vancouver Canucks have Pettersson, and they'll have Hughes to sign as well. So that'll be fine. So that'll come off the books just at the right time. Anders Lee, $7 million for 7 seasons. That's fine. I don't have a big problem with that. I think Lee's a 30-goal scorer. Simmons, $5 million for a year. It's only for a year. Varlamov, $5 million for 4 years with the Islanders. And I know there was a lot of talk about going from Leonard to Varlamov. Here's the thing. Last summer when Leonard went to the Islanders, I don't remember a whole lot of people saying, oh, this is a steal for the Islanders. So the idea that they're going through a massive downgrade, we might want to wait until they play the games before we make that decision. Bobrovsky, $10 million for 7 years. I don't like goaltenders getting $10 million per. So again, but that's the market value, right? That's what they had to pay, and they had the cap space. So I really can't say a whole lot of things about Florida losing this deal because they get him for free. You can't lose that way, and they had the cap space, and they desperately needed a goaltender after Reimer and Luongo both struggled last year. Pavelski, $7 million for 3 years, which this contract and Corey Perry seems to have a lot of people thinking Dallas is fantastic. Now they're going to win everything. And all I keep thinking is, okay, so I get it, but Pavelski's 34, turning 35. There's some danger there of some regression in his numbers. And Corey Perry had a miserable year to follow another miserable year. So I don't know how much of a huge win it is, but we'll see with Pavelski. At 3 years, there's not really any risk. Duchesne, $8 million at 7 years. I don't know that Duchesne. Again, I know he had 70 points this year. I don't know if he hits that again. It's going to be really interesting to see how things go with him with Nashville. There's an interesting little flow chart too, showing how what Ottawa got for Duchesne coming in and what they gave up, and it's an even more lopsided trade now than it looked like at the time. Gustav Nyquist, $5.5 million for 4 years. It's a very reasonable cap hit, and Columbus still has cap space, as I said, to go after Marner. Leonard, $5 million for a year. No problem. Panarin, $11.6 million for 7 years. I still think it's too much money, but I know there's a lot of people that don't. We'll come back and revisit this in a year and see whether or not that's too much money for Artemi Panarin. Zuccarello, $6 million for 5 years. Cap hit's great. I think the term is maybe a year or two long. Maybe it's bought out 3 years down the road. The interesting thing is that it's Minnesota that made that move, and Minnesota doesn't feel like a team that's on the verge of being a champion. They're just middling, and this might eke them into a playoff spot. I don't know. Anton Strawman, $5.5 million for 3 years. It's a good move for Florida. Again, because it's only 3 years, you can look and go, the cap hit seems a bit high, but it's 3 years. Myers, $6 million for 5 years. We'll end on that one. The Canucks being raked over the coals by many. However, the asking price was rumored to be as high as $8 million on Myers, so $6 million is more reasonable. If he was at 8, I would be railing against the deal as much as anybody. But at 6, and again with Edler's contract coming off the books in 2 years, it doesn't really strap the team as badly as some people think it does. It's the Eriksson contract that's really got the Canucks over a barrel. I don't put the Myers one in that category at all, and it's 1 year less than Eriksson. And the difference between Eriksson and Myers to me is that if Myers isn't putting up the offensive numbers, he's still got other parts of his game that are good enough to justify paying him some money. Eriksson, I just haven't seen it. And I know people say, well, there's a lot of things he does well, and it's fine, and it's not that bad. But, when you've got 30-some goals in 3 years, and you're making $6 million per, and you were supposed to be a top 6 forward, and a goal scorer, I don't know. Anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in regards to which of these contracts do you think is getting bought out 2 years from now? Which contract are we looking at next year and saying, well, what were they thinking? And which one's going to be the huge bargain? So there you go. Just a little chart just to look at just for today. Just something to do. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.